So about 15 minutes before we got done recording the episode that you're going to be hearing for as long as you guys keep listening, is James Franklin was fired after his loss to Northwestern. Penn State decided to fire him after dropping two straight games to inferior opponents. We talk about it more in the episode, but you gave me a list of coaches who I think are going to be fired by the end of the season, and James Franklin was one of them. And coincidentally, today, everybody in Penn State feels the same. He's owed about $8 million a year, which will total out to be $48 million for the remaining of the contract. He did sign a 10-year extension in 2022 that rise to 2031. There's no specification on how much money will be paid in a lump sum amount, but associate head coach and cornerbacks coach Terry Smith will serve as interim coach for the remainder of the season. The bigger question obviously becomes is who do they replace him with, and when do they replace him with, or when do they replace him, and does that coach have enough time in the recruiting transfer portal window to kind of make a mark for next season?
I think there are so many fascinating parts about this story that have yet to come out that will just unfold in front of everybody all together. The first thing that I think will have to happen with Penn State, if they are smart, and I think Michigan messed this up, is when your coach leaves, whether he's fired, he leaves the NFL, whatever the case is, that you don't try and hire from within, that you go external. It's clear that James Franklin and what he was trying to do and what he was building was good enough to win a certain amount of football games, but not good enough to get over the hump. And at Penn State, clearly the standard is being in contention for a national championship. And so I feel like that entire coaching staff is going to be gone, wiped off the map, and they're going to hire a brand new coach. Now, what that buyout was like, I think is going to have to impact who they can get next. I just happen to feel like you can't just fire a guy, pay him somewhere around 30 million is where I think he's going to settle, maybe 25, and then have enough money to say, we're going to hire another coach for a 5 year, 50 million, 5 year deal, whatever the case is. So that's one. The second thing that I think that we're going to take away from this is that we're not going to see any more 10-year contracts. I don't believe that that's in play anymore. Kirby Smart has one. He's the highest paid head coach. I think James Franklin at the time was third or fourth. With the way that the game is changing so rapidly, what the landscape looked like in 2021 and what it looks like in 2025 are so different, are so
Right.
stark. Who's relevant, who's not, that I just don't think you can have a situation where you feel like you can have the same guy as your coach for 10 years. You have to continue to prove it, unless you're a Nick Saban type, which, by the way, there aren't any. Like, I don't think that that's left. So that's one. The next piece that I think is really interesting is recruiting and the portal. Yes, we know that Penn State will have to recruit through the portal with their new head coach, but what people don't realize is that you get a 15-day window for the players to hit the portal. Now, there are some guys who played in some games and some guys who didn't play in games that could technically get a redshirt year and hit the portal. There are other guys that could hit the portal right now this week and be on a campus, by semester end at a different place, ready to play spring ball for that new school. They have 2 weeks in one day to make that happen. And so I wonder what that Penn State roster looks like in 2 or 3 weeks as they kind of round out their season. The next piece that I'm really trying to consider is who gets hired next. I don't know who takes that job. I know that there are a lot of people who want that job. That job, they have a lot. If you have enough confidence in your boosters and your collective and what you've got to fire a guy who's owed basically $50 million still, you can fire him mid-season, no conversations about it, and you think you can hire somebody else, you have enough budget. So that Penn State job is a very attractive job. So who gets hired? I'm going to say I love Kurt Cignetti. He's in the Big Ten already. Why not Kurt Cignetti? If they hire Kurt Cignetti, the way that this coaching stuff works is you don't hire a coach after the season. You hire him basically at the beginning of December. What that looks like is if you're the head coach and you get hired at a different place, you don't coach your team for the postseason. That's not how it works because you have to get ahead of recruiting. You have to get ahead of keeping guys on the roster. You have to get ahead of the transfer portal as well as everyone's season has come to an end. And there's only one transfer portal window now to the beginning of the year. So if you're playing for a national championship, guess what you're not doing as a head coach, being able to go and visit with guys and get them to come to your school. So I do think that there's going to be a huge cascading effect because now if that Penn State job comes open, which it is now, Kirk Cignetti takes that, Indiana's job's wide open, that kind of solves the picture for what maybe Auburn wants to do with Hugh Freeze or what Mike Norvell's going to happen to him at Florida State. So I think there's a huge cascading effect that happens. And I think James Franklin getting fired wasn't on my bingo card just yet. I thought he could have a bad season and they could recover. And so I think that puts a huge shuffle as to who takes that position next.
Well, you talked about it in the episode that people will hear is that Signetti is that main domino to fall. And if he does take the job at Penn State, which I don't think he does, I don't think he does yet. I think he likes what he's building at Indiana, and I think that there's something that's better that'd be more suitable for him that he could go into in maybe 2 or 3 years after he's done at Indiana. I look at Alex Golish from USF as a coach who could possibly get that chance. I think you're going to see Penn State swing for the fences a little bit and try to grab one of these coaches that has proven it at a lower level, whether it is the American Conference. Um, I don't think Billy Napier gets a job upgrade after he gets fired at Florida. Mike Novella, same thing. Spencer Danielson, the Boise State head coach, is kind of another name that comes to mind. Boise State, Washington, those West Coast schools that aren't USC and those schools, they seem like kind of stepping stone opportunities. So maybe you get a guy to move across the country and do that. Golish is probably the main guy that I would think right now. Hugh Freeze is another good one. It just depends. Hugh Freeze seems like a coach who would only really succeed in the SEC, like down south. That's where his recruiting hotbed seems to kind of lay. But I think Penn State puts themselves in a really tough position right now because you're asking one of these coaches to drop everything, come to Penn State or come to Pennsylvania, and now get on this recruiting show and step in front of a program who's got angry fans, who's only looking for an upgrade from James Franklin. And do you really think you're going to get an upgrade from James Franklin in the first 1 or 2 years of a new head coaching regime? I'm not really sure because you're talking about replacing a whole staff. I'm not really sure it's going to work that way. And so the grass may be greener for Penn State on the other side, but I don't think it's in the immediate 1 to 2 years.
So I think that there are a lot of pieces. We could also see like an offensive coordinator make that leap to a head coach. Like we could see that pipeline fill up. Here's a name that I don't think people are going to consider. They'll probably laugh at this, but I think there's going to be some real steam here. Is Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame being potentially up for that job at Penn State? Penn State, now Notre Dame has a lot to desire. Big NIL budget. They have plenty of boosters. They're not in a conference. They don't really have any standards as to who they have to beat and don't have to beat. But I look at that Penn State job as a step above the Notre Dame job. And I think that there is a chance that you look at a guy like him, like Brian Kelly left Notre Dame to go to LSU, where that Notre Dame job is great for the right coach. But when a bigger job opens up, when you can recruit a little bit differently and recruit different places across the country, like Penn State becomes a really attractive job for a guy like him. I think if things weren't to work out or if things weren't going the right way, I think Lincoln Riley could be another good coach. I don't
Hmm.
know that you'd want to leave LA for College Station, but maybe. And I think this is gonna sound crazy. I think Deion Sanders has a great chance as well as a coach
Oh,
that could potentially step in. So here's the thing about Penn State is you have to bring new life, new blood, new everything into that program. You built up from 2016. You had a good year. 2021, you had a solid year, but you've been just okay, average, above average for a number of years. And you gave a guy a 10-year extension to just keep being right above average. And now you get let him go because he had two bad losses. I think you have to bring in a guy that really rejuvenates the fan base. Uh, Mike Elko to Texas A&M was a guy that nobody really saw coming. Nobody really liked that hire at the time, but it was. I think a guy like Alex Golish could be a really good nod to your point. Where I disagree a little bit is I don't know that he is ready for that Penn State job yet. I don't know that he is going to be a big enough name to go and recruit against Ohio State, to go and recruit against Michigan, to go and recruit against USC or Oregon or all the Big Ten names that are out there. So I, the job is fascinating because it's a marquee job. It's one of the best jobs in college football, clearly, but you have to go and hire a guy that's ready to do it. I look at a guy like Dan Mullins, who's at UNLV right now, and they, at least from this previous weekend, were undefeated. And so, like, could he be in that game? I don't know. I, could could Urban Meyer come back into football and coach? Could Nick Saban come back and maybe take that job? Like, there's a lot to figure out. So there's just so many pieces. What are your thoughts?
I just think it's going to be really tough for Penn State to kind of get back on this ship of top tier Big Ten teams. Now, as easily as Indiana has risen to fame, I think they're Kirk Cignetti leaving away from going back to the bottom tier of the Big Ten. Penn State to me is never gonna be Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oregon for that matter. I don't even think Penn State's still a better job than USC or Florida. or maybe even Florida State. I look at Penn State as okay, they have tradition behind Joe Paterno and what they've won. Obviously, that's been wiped out for wild reasons. But James Franklin, I mean, you're talking, he's been there for 12 years and he hasn't won anything. And so the expectation for Penn State to be anything other than this just kind of NFL farm system for defensive players, I don't really see them being much other than that unless they get a really, really, really elite coach in there. I don't think Nick Saban is coming back to coach at Penn State. Um, a name that I kind of thought about, which is really, really weird to even have this thought was, does Penn State go after a guy like an Eli Drinkwitz who he's in the SEC. He's clearly not Kirby Smart or Sarkisian. He's probably not even Mike Elko at this point. But that guy went from Wyoming to Mizzou. Mizzou hires him from Wyoming, and you're like, okay, maybe in year 2 or 3, this guy can get it rolling. Well, in year 1, he kind of made his splash and made his impact, and now it's kind of his program. Now, he might not be willing to leave that. He seems like a guy who kind of values being in the SEC, but the SEC and the Big Ten, I mean, they're right there. And Penn State is an upgrade in resources and stadium and fan output than Mizzou is. Mizzou's got the stadium under construction. That's great, but that's not going to look like Penn State's. It's not Death Valley up there. So I think he could possibly be a name that gets bought out and Penn State uses the money to hire somebody like that. I don't think Penn State can afford to go and get one of these other coaches that's kind of failed out of where they've gone now because that's kind of the blood that James Franklin's going to be rolling in. Now, I think James Franklin has a chance to probably take his time with his decision. If he wants to jump right back into coaching, then he will. I could see James Franklin taking the 26, 27 year off and, kind of re-gauging how things go later on because as you could tell, these coaches are kind of on a year by year basis at this point. There could be a better job than Penn State that opens up for James Franklin in the future after the dust kind of settles and then people realize like this coaching thing might be a little bit harder with the NIL and everything moving around than we might think. Billy Napier, who's been on a hot seat for forever, who's to say that James Franklin's a better replacement than him? I think he's more value coach than him. So who's to say that, I think James Franklin really wanted to be at Penn State. I think Penn State really wanted James Franklin to work out. But now that he isn't, I think both of these sides, I think James Franklin could be the ultimate winner in this. I think Penn State thinks that the grass is greener. And I think James Franklin has a chance to kind of sit out next season, let the dust settle, like I said, and then maybe choose where he wants to go after that.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think Josh Pate said that too. He's like, there's going to be a time where a marquee coach gets fired and he goes and does some TV for a year or two. He sounds really smart. Then he gets a really good opportunity at a really good school. And Dan Mullen at UNLV is a great case for that. I think with James Franklin specifically in this entire situation, does he come out on top? Well, he's about to get paid 25 to 35 million probably on that buyout to do nothing. So yeah, he's going to end up winning. At Penn State, the question becomes, what are you really vying for? What are you battling for? You could argue that they are an injury or two away from Ohio State or Oregon. Not that I wish on anybody from them being the best team in the Big Ten. Like
Hmm.
you were right there. Now, did you having a down year? Yeah. Did you build up to this? Did the coach tell you this is the best team he's ever had at Penn State? Yes. And did it show out? No. So I get that. What happens next, I think, with them is you have to hire a big name coach. You have to almost steal somebody away. And so I think that the conversation started to get rolling after that UCLA loss. Like we didn't beat Oregon. We're never going to be better than this. We know what James Franklin is. Time to move on. Something about this feels like to me, they made this fire the day after the loss that they have somebody in mind they're going after, and I'm not sure who it is, but I think they've got a really good name. The next thing to this though that I really want to ask you is like Penn State fires James Franklin. What school now feels the courage that they can fire their head coach? Because like to me, not that I think this is going to happen, but I feel like Clemson and Dabo Sweeney, it's kind of a weird situation. And Penn State rode with James Franklin because he kind of pulled them out of a weird spot. Dabo Sweeney obviously reached the greatest of heights with winning 2 national championships, but it's like it's clearly not working out here either. Like who feels the confidence like Penn State fired James Franklin? we can fire our guy. I think who is next, in my opinion.
That's really interesting. And the first thing that popped up in my head, which is even crazier, Joey Aguilar and Nico Meliava completed the first trade in college football as far as players swapping places. There's a chance that Penn State and Clemson swap coaches, and neither school wants to take that seat back. They don't want to take a step back and hire a guy within, or they can't get the guy that they truly want. There is a chance to me, super hot take by the way, that I think that Dabo Swinney and James Franklin could possibly trade schools. May not be this year, but it could be after James Franklin takes a year off and Clemson struggles again. I tell you what, Clemson struggles again next year, he's gone. He is super gone. So James Franklin might want to hop in there. That's a really good school. They got the money. They're in the ACC. It's an easier conference to win. Who knows what happens with Miami? I, I, who knows? I mean, it's a great guessing game. Like I said, like you'll hear in the episode as we continue on that this coaching carousel is going to be super interesting. I think James Franklin. I think he takes a year off. I think he looks at the Florida job. I think he looks at Florida State potentially what could happen over there. I think if Lincoln Riley decides to move, he might go out west. There's a lot of things that the best option for him, I think, is for him. He gets fired. You take the rest of this year off. You be with your family. Next year, you go into TV, join NBC, ABC, Fox. Who knows? You join one of those networks. You go on TV for a year, and then after that, you kind of reset and look at the landscape there. That would be my that would be my advice for James Franklin. If you're talking about some of these dominoes falling and then needing to kind of, you don't want to miss your window, like you said. So if Clemson becomes open, that immediately becomes the next best job available over Florida, over Arkansas, over any of those schools. So if that happens, I think you jump right in there. And then if Dabo Swinney gets fired, he's the next top name for Penn State. Maybe Penn State fans don't want him, but shit, Dabo Swinney's got two chips, something that James Franklin doesn't have. So you could take that with the recruiting ability of Dabo Swinney, who has it. Well, if he gets fired, I think he will change his recruiting ways. I think his style has kind of worn thin with Clemson, and that firing him might be the kind of the awakening that he needs to change, kind of like what happened with Coach K at Duke.
Mm.
But I think there's a chance that these two schools could swap coaches, and it may not happen, and it may not happen right now. But I think there's a chance that he ends up at Clemson or James Franklin takes the year off and kind of waits to see what the landscape looks like.
I think James Franklin should take the year off. I think you need to be missed more than you need to be remembered. And so I think that there's an opportunity for him to sit back, collect his money, hang out, spend time with the family. Like this will be the first time in I don't know how many years he gets to be at home for Christmas, not worrying about game plan, not worrying about doing anything but unwrapping gifts with his kids. And he'll have plenty of money to get his kids whatever gifts they want. So he'll be hanging out. I think for the next phase of Penn State is okay, you let go of your coach. And I talked about this when Michigan beat Ohio State and they wanted to fire Ryan Day. It's like, buddy, you're so close. And then they end up winning that championship. So it's like seems ridiculous in hindsight, but it's like you're so close. You blow this up. Drew Aller's hitting the portal. He has to. He has no choice. So he's gone. Your running backs, maybe they leave. I guess they have to technically stay because they don't have any eligibility left. But your roster gets decimated quickly. And then you're recruiting, all your recruits decommit. Every recruit decommits because they don't know who's going to be the next guy. And they were already going to decommit because you guys weren't winning any games. So now next year is off the table for as far as you being a good football team. That's gone. So now you're talking about a 2-year process. And then the coach is going to say, well, I've only been here a year. So it's really a 3-year process. And then you need to beat Oregon, Ohio State, and assuming Kurt Signe doesn't take this job, Indiana, and Michigan. So you have 4 hurdles to get over. Can a new coach come in and get over all 4 of those hurdles in the first 3 years? I don't think so. Unless it's a stud, but then the stud, if he's really a stud, is already a head coach somewhere. So I don't know. A funny name that's always out there that just I think is super entertaining that gets clicks is Lane Kiffin. He's always in the seat for like who somebody else could hire him away from Ole Miss. And it's like the Florida job people keep talking about. It's like, okay, that's interesting. Well, why not Penn State? Why couldn't he just go coach in the Big Ten, bring that offense, that pace, that tempo to the Big Ten, and just basically do it better than Dan Lanning does? Like, why not? So there are so many things, but I think the recruiting image gets really ugly for Penn State because you miss out on everything. The reason you fire a guy right now is so you can hire a guy before season's over and then try to salvage some of the team and bring in some guys. But now it feels like you have to hire a guy who is at a school that's doing decently so that he can bring his guys to the school. And I think that's where it gets a little bit tricky. You have to look at that second transfer portal window of, okay, this coach got fired, this coach gets hired, that coach leaves his original position. Now he's going to bring his players over. That's where I think this can really be a win for Penn State. And so if you look at it that way, like is Texas Tech then a job? Like probably not. Nobody has more resources than them right now. Um, who I Iowa State maybe like Matt Campbell, could he be in that conversation? Lane Kiffin could be in that conversation. Like I don't know where this goes, but I feel like you have to hire a coach that has players who can he can bring to the team, and you guys can start winning right away.